These are some graphs out of some of Karina Hall and Tony Fowler's work from a published Fisheries Research Development Corporation. It's this set. You can see where cuttlefish are. The dots here are equivalent to number per trawl. You can see where they are in February, and again here in February and further over in April. You can see the cuttlefish are just off Point Lowly. In the environmental impact statement, BHP state that they will restrict their construction operations to a reduced time period that includes these February samples. So cuttlefish are quite close to the reef at that time of year, and we really don't know what impact construction operations at this time of year could have on cuttlefish. Just to focus on the biomass, again, this is information from Karina Hall's report, work collected as part of her PhD, and then more subsequently, the 2005 survey was commissioned by the Department of Environment and Heritage, and the 2008 one was done as part of this EIS. Don't worry about all the colours. This is when the fishery, this is the catch of the fishery in 1997 prior to the closure. So you can see that. And then over time, we've got a decrease in cuttlefish numbers. Now, these numbers might seem alarming, but I'm a little concerned about our ability to use these data as any sort of baseline upon which to potentially evaluate an environmental impact. Two reasons. Cuttlefish are short-lived, as I mentioned. They live only 1 to 2 years. Within the population, Karina Hall's work shown that there's potentially 2 different life history strategies. There's one lot that grow fairly rapidly and mature within the first year, and then there's potentially some that don't reproduce that first year but reproduce in the second year. If we're to evaluate properly any potential impact of a desalination plant, it's critically important that we know the proportion that fall within each of these year classes. And the reason for this is largely because they are only short-lived. There will be what we refer to as no storage effect in the population. Species like snapper can go out there, reproduce 1 year, they have a bad year. They're still around to come back and reproduce later. The giant Australian cuttlefish won't be like that. It reproduces once and then dies. So this becomes even more critical. What it means is that the strength of any generation is highly dependent on the numbers that reproduce in the previous year. The other issues in relation to some of that work, well, I think it's great work. It was a great start. I think they've really only focused on surveys at one time. So all the sites have only been surveyed at one time. So that's assuming that all their sampling occurs when it's peak abundance. And yet from some of Karina's work that was done early on, where she did sample multiple sites at different times, we know peak abundance among sites changes. So the timing of that actually changes. Now, all of this could potentially mean that the numbers of cuttlefish that we're estimating are reduced, which may not be a huge issue in the long term. The other information that one of my students, Nick Payne's been looking at is the residence time of males and females on that breeding aggregation. So there's an implicit assumption when you sample a population only once that all the individuals have come in and all the individuals are there throughout the breeding season. What his work is that cuttlefish do not spend the entire breeding season on the breeding aggregation. 25 days, and for females it's even less, only around 7 days. So they're potentially not there for a huge period of time. But what all this information means is that we have to be careful using that biomass numbers data as any sort of baseline data to detect impacts. Okay, just a little bit of information on other species. This is snapper and its work from Richard Saunders, one of my PhD students. This is of 10 years of sampling. 2006 was the best recruitment year for this species. So here we're looking at the numbers of small snapper that potentially recruit into Upper Spencer Gulf. You can see where they recruit. Up north of Point Lowly, south of Point Lowly, down here. Over subsequent years, the recruitment was less, including virtually nil in 2008, where we only got 3 individuals from all of trawls in all of those regions. So I'm really just putting this in. I feel like BHP's glossed over the importance of commercial and recreational fisheries in this region. Snapper is a classic example. This is an important juvenile nursery area in Upper Spencer Gulf. And from other work that I've done with researchers at Sardie Aquatic, we believe that all snapper in South Australia potentially originate from either 1 or 2 areas in the state and then disperse out to other regions. So if we impact these individuals, we have potential to impact catches in the entire state waters. The other species I would like to mention is urchins. It's also an important macroinvertebrate in this region, and the species we get is actually Heliosidaris erythrogramma. All of the ecotoxicology work in relation to urchins was done on a species that does not occur in South Australian waters. So I would suggest that they do need to repeat some of the work that they've done on the East Coast species, on the species that actually occurs here. There's evidence in the scientific literature, so the peer-reviewed scientific literature, that urchins in the Mediterranean have disappeared at desalination sites, and there's also evidence in the scientific literature of low fertilisation rates and high abnormal larval development at high salinities. So we shouldn't just be looking at how things survive in this brine. We should be also looking at adult reproductive behaviour, whether we still get species reproducing. So just some concluding remarks. Given the options that were proposed in the EIS, extraction of water from the River Murray, extraction of water from the Great Artesian Basin, new groundwater extraction, I think I'd have to agree that desalination is perhaps one of the better options that they proposed. However, I'm not sure they've really investigated well the 6 locations for the site of the desalination plant. They seem to have picked the site based solely on infrastructure and cost options for BHP. And I think that other locations should require further assessment, and that the ultimate choice of a desalination site should be chosen based on minimising environmental impacts and maximising environmental sustainability, rather than on infrastructure cost options as it currently appears. Finally, I'd just like to finish up with a couple of slides. One is my little son here, who managed to get out to see the cuttlefish this year by going in one of these boats with the little viewing platform. This is him here. He had the time of his life. I would like to think that his grandchildren get to go out and enjoy the cuttlefish the way he did. He's already asked me how many years until he's 12. He's currently 6, because he wants to go scuba diving. And finally, I'll just leave you with a picture of a sunset over Point Lowly. Thank you.